Israel is at war.
The Russian response to Hamas attack on Israel can be divided into two parts. First, there was an official response, and then there was a propaganda response that was directed towards the internal Russian audience. And what's striking is that the external response was quite muted, and there was just one statement issued by the official spokesman of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Saturday afternoon. It was very short, and then there was silence. Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs Lavrov made a more elaborate statement on Monday afternoon after his meeting with the Secretary General of the Arab League. On the one hand, it might be understandable because this was a weekend, but usually this doesn't prevent Russian diplomats and the Russian politicians from commenting on external affairs. And the quiet that was kind of descended on Russia in that sense was quite unusual. On the other hand, the propaganda coverage was extremely extensive. This was the main point on the news, this was the main point on the talk shows. If we look at the official response, especially the initial one, it is striking for several reasons. First, there was an attitude which can be described as blaming the victim. There was no condemnation of Hamas for attacking civilians. There was no condemnation of Hamas on attacking Israel. The blame was clearly, although only implicitly, not explicitly, put on Israel in the sense that the communique said that the violence, the so-called escalation of the situation, as the communique put it, in a very sort of roundabout manner, in a very mild manner, was, and I quote, direct consequence of the failure to implement the two-stage solution, which indirectly puts the blame on Israel. And then the second actor that was named as guilty for this situation was the West. The West was named explicitly as the party that is guilty because it has been blocking the negotiation process, allegedly blocking the negotiation process within this UN accepted format of the Middle East Quartet, composed of the US, the EU, Russia, and UN. The third issue was that there was a certain false symmetry in the message. Namely, there was a call for immediate ceasefire, and since it was issued only in the afternoon of the 7th of October, it implied that Israel should not conduct operations designed to clear the territory of Israel from Hamas armed personnel that crossed the border from Gaza. In that sense, this was a very interesting statement, showing Russian priorities and showing especially complete, I would say, lack of empathy with the victims. Now the propaganda response was quite different, but before I go into this, I would add that clearly somebody in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or in the Kremlin realized that this was perhaps a mistake, because Mr. Lavrov, talking on Monday afternoon, emphasized Russia's sympathy for the victims, and he said explicitly both Israeli and Palestinian, and he condemned the taking of hostages, again, without naming Hamas, but it was clear who he was talking about. So in a way, it seems that the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs tried to correct the course. But still, there are only these two statements. 3 days have passed, and there's very few things that official persons in Russia uttered about this whole serious crisis. Now, when we come to the propaganda response, there was emphasis on failure of Israel to respond to this attack. So it was treated as a kind of as a failure of intelligence, as a failure of Israel as a military organization. The second thing that was, again, like in the official communique, Western guilt for this event. Basically, the line was that the West managed to launch another war, with an interesting subline that Hamas was financed by Western money. Then there was an interesting topic about the inevitable escalation of the war. Russian experts generally predicted that this war was not going to remain limited to the fighting between Israel and Gaza, but is very likely to spread to the entire region. That would involve ultimately also Hezbollah, Arab volunteers that would come to the help of Palestinians, perhaps Iran. What is also interesting is that while the official propaganda was trying to show some sympathy with Israeli population, especially emphasizing that significant section of the Israeli population has its roots in Russia, but at the same time there was a certain satisfaction with the fact that political emigres who fled from Russia after the beginning of the war with Ukraine have found themselves in a very difficult and dangerous situation. So there was a kind of smug satisfaction with the fact that they deserve their fate, and it's a good thing that they found themselves in this situation. If you look at this conflict from the point of view of Russian interests, there is no question that this conflagration is very advantageous for the Kremlin. There's a lot of speculation about Russian participation in this conflagration, but so far we don't have any proof or any direct signs that Russia was responsible or in some way involved in this situation. But nevertheless, it's clearly of great advantage to the Kremlin. There are several benefits. First of all, the U.S. is already shifting its concentration, its political concentration, its strategic concentration to Israel. U.S. has to provide military help, equipment, financial aid. This will divert U.S. attention from the Ukrainian problem, and the Israelis and Ukrainians would compete for the same resources. That's very good from the Russian point of view. Second, because of this unequivocal support for Israel coming from the U.S. and the West in general, Russian position, which is balanced, but balanced in a way that's beneficial, it's advantageous to the Arab side, because the official Russian position is that the real cause of this conflagration is the delay in implementing the two-state solution. So Russia's diplomatic response has been, well, to solve this we have to move quickly and implement a two-state solution with creation of the Palestinian state in the Gaza and West Bank with the capital in East Jerusalem. This is very close, and this is official diplomatic line on this, seems coordinated, almost identical with the one presented by many Arab countries, especially by Arab League. It's going to make US even less popular in the Arab world than it is, and Russia more popular than it has been. It will make American Western efforts that have been launched some time ago to persuade Arab countries to distance themselves from Russia and to adopt a more pro-Ukrainian position in the context of Russian-Ukrainian war are going to be even more difficult, if not hopeless, in this situation. It also creates a very difficult position for Israel. Israel, threatened with direct threat to its security, is even less likely to cross Russia by changing its neutral position in the Ukrainian-Russian war. And it's even likely that some political forces in Israel would try to earn gratitude and ensure support from the Russian side by trying to persuade the West, and especially the US, to limit its support for Ukraine and to look for a solution for the end of the conflict in Ukraine by accepting, by and large, Russian conditions. This would help Israelis in the sense that it would help to get rid of this competitor for American political support, for military support, financial support, and diplomatic engagement. Last but not least, this conflagration puts an end, or makes it very difficult, the process that has been taking place of reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Israel. This process, if carried forward, would have meant that Israel would be less reliant and less insecure, and then it would be perhaps less careful about not crossing Russia's land line, and would be more free to adopt a different line, a more pro-Ukraine line in the context of Russian-Ukrainian conflict. This is also a plus for Russia. I think generally, even though Russia, the official diplomatic line is calling for the end of the ceasefire, suspension of armed hostilities, and is emphasizing that there is no armed solution to this Israeli-Palestinian conflict, this is spurious on part of Russia. This narrative, because in fact, if you look at Russian interests, it's pretty much clear that conflagration and escalation of violence, and especially geographic escalation, horizontal escalation, holds benefits for Russia. The worse situation in the Middle East is, the more worried the US is, the more attention and the more resources this crisis is, American and Western resources, this crisis is going to devour. And also it would create another huge problem, especially for Europe, in the form of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of new refugees. This would create such a huge problem that it would clearly complicate the policy of Western, especially European, but also American support for Ukraine. The advantages of this are potentially huge for Russia. So it's clear that Russia is interested in further escalation of the conflict and its development into all Middle East conflagration. Not speaking about the prices of oil, which is a key interest of Russia. The prices of oil in such a case are going to skyrocket, and this is will be another huge benefit to the Russian war economy.